Over the last few years, I've been lucky enough to get my hands on a number of Sea-Gull watches, all containing different in-house movements, because let's not forget, Sea-Gull are known primarily for manufacturing watch movements. Yes, they make watches as well, but they are a huge global manufacturer of watch movements. I've reviewed watches like this one containing the ST17, and this one containing the ST21, and this one containing the ST25, and don't forget I've reviewed a number of watches containing the ST19, that beautiful mechanical chronograph movement. But in the watch I'm going to show you today is a very special movement. It is a legal clone of an ETA 2892. It's 3.6 millimeters thick. The movement, not the watch, the movement. Incredible movement. Right, let me show you the watch. So this is the watch I am reviewing today, but more importantly, here is the movement inside this watch. It is the ST18, a legal clone of the ETA 2892, which is quite a step up from the ETA 2824. The movement inside this watch and the original ETA 2892, 3.6 millimeters thick. Incredible. 42 hours of power reserve, 28,800 beats per hour, instant date change at the 12 o'clock. Yeah, a very nice movement. The ETA is not a cheap movement at all. And in fact, this movement inside of this watch, the ST18, is also not a cheap watch. I've seen these sold on their own on eBay for around $150. So yeah, a decent movement inside this watch. So understandably, Sea-Gull have decided to show off the movement inside this watch by including an exhibition caseback, and I'll test both crystals for sapphire before the end of the video. And I'll also include at the end of this video a little mini clip of the lume degrading, because there is some lume on this watch, on the hands, and filled into those applied indices. So yeah, we'll see how that performs over the 5 minutes. But yeah, the finishing on this movement, that guilloche sort of engine turning finishing, is okay. It's not the best I've seen. I mean, it's a nice touch, isn't it? It's nice to see, but yeah, I don't think it's been executed to an incredible standard. But it's, yeah, nice. So that's the movement covered. What about the watch? Well, it's definitely different to the usual watches they send me for review. On the whole, they've sent me in the past more affordable watches with the more affordable movements in them. They generally come on fairly cheap leather straps. This is a sort of mid-tier watch by Sea-Gull, all stainless steel. It's a very loose homage watch, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, it's quite original as well, actually, with that sort of double bezel. They offer it with a silver accents instead of blue, but I opted for the more colourful version. I think the silver one is likely to be more popular, but yeah, I just thought it'd be nice to have a splash of colour on the watch, as it's so different to the watches I usually see by Sea-Gull. The bracelets impressed me, actually. The finishing feels very soft and smooth. All of the corners have been rounded off quite a bit, so it's got a really soft, sort of silky feel. And yeah, there's a little bit of looseness in the bracelet, but not much at all. It feels like a high quality bracelet, actually. The brushing is a beautiful satin brushing. The polishing seems nice, and they've used their logo, actually, or a sort of element of their logo on these center links, which are polished, and they're going to be sort of fingerprint magnets. I've had to wipe those down a couple of times already. But yeah, one thing that I think is going to be an issue, well, it is an issue for me, is the lack of micro adjustment and smaller links, because they've included a butterfly clasp, which just feels like a fairly standard butterfly clasp. But there's no ability that I can see anyway to adjust the length of the bracelet to any sort of micro level. And unfortunately, I've been unable to get a comfortable fit. If I take out a link, it's too tight. If I put one back in, it's too loose. And I think for a watch costing, well, as much as it does, that is unacceptable. And I've already fed that back to the official store on AliExpress, and they are going to pass on that information to Sea-Gull. What gets done with that information, who knows? But yeah, I've already told them, not including some sort of micro adjustment on this bracelet is just not going to fly with people. If you're going to ask people to spend this much money on a watch, they need to know it's going to fit. No one wants to gamble on a watch costing this much money, and that's exactly what it will be. It's a real shame, but that one thing alone is just going to stop people, I think, from buying this watch. Anyway, let's move on to the case. A really interesting case, isn't it? And you can see just how thin this watch is, making use of that movement being 3.6 millimeters thick. Just incredible. And they've included 2 bezels on this thing as well. Yeah, really interesting crown guards, quite rectangular or quite angular, I should say. Lots of things, lots of details going on, lots of little sort of chamfered edges and angles, and yeah, look at those polished sort of facets around the outside of that steel bezel, and then you've got the 12 facet blue bezel underneath that. I mean, yeah, it is an interesting watch, and the dial is actually very, very nice, beautifully executed actually. Strongish sunburst dial. You've got a raised chapter ring around the outside, a sort of double chapter ring, because you've got markers on the inner dial, markers on the outer dial, which yeah, well, the inner dial doesn't have markers between the 11 and the 1, which is interesting, isn't it? Date complication at the 6, beautifully framed. Really nice hands, double facet hands. One side is brushed, the other side is polished, which is, again, quite unusual and a little bit interesting. Nice applied indices, beautifully applied logo and printed Sea-Gull under the 12. Yeah, I'm really impressed with the dial and the hands, actually. And yeah, the finishing of the steel looks to be very, very nice. Beautiful sunburst finishing on that bezel, that steel bezel look. I'm reaching right out to those polished facets around the outside. So yeah, it's just such a shame, isn't it? Such a shame. You've got 9mm links. I mean, who's going to take a gamble on it? Right, before I pop it on the wrist to show you how I've managed to get this one to fit, let's test both of these crystals. Let's see if they've included a sapphire sandwich with this watch. So sapphire front, oh, mineral crystal on the back. What a shame. Right, let me now show you this watch on my roughly average sized wrist, and I'll show it with one link removed, which is how it is now, and one link added back in. So these would be my options if I was to buy this watch and choose to wear it. At the moment, it's just too tight. You can see how much it's basically compressing my wrist. I couldn't wear it like this, actually. That is too tight for me. But it's a nice looking watch, isn't it? I've put some dimensions and the weight and a few specifications in the bottom right hand corner there for you guys. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting and unusual. I love the fact that they're going in a slightly different direction with this one. Integrated bracelet, some really individual design elements on this watch. But yeah, I mean, it's... yeah, unfortunately, unlikely to do very well, this one, sadly. Right, let me add a link back in and I'll show it with an extra link. Right, here it is then with an extra link added back in. And at this moment in time, actually, it doesn't feel too loose because my wrist, well, I'm a little bit warmer than I was yesterday when I tried it like this. And yeah, my wrist is a little bit more swollen, so it doesn't feel like it's rattling around too much. It still feels looser than I would prefer, but yeah, yesterday when I tried it on, it was just dropping right down to my hand and it was sliding up and down my arm too much. So yeah, what a shame, what a shame. Yeah, loom's not fantastic either. The movement doesn't seem to be running particularly well. It's fairly accurate, and beat error and amplitude are okay, but there's just a few rogue ticks that you can see on the time grapher. So overall, good effort, but see me after class, I think.